Have you ever wondered if there's still time? There's time to forgive. To start over. To feel your heart race for something worthwhile. There's time to rewrite your own story. Even when it seems like it's already over, if you're in your golden years and feel like the world no longer listens to you. If everything seems to have slowed down on the outside, but inside there's still a flame burning, then this video is for you. Today, I'll tell you the story of Anselmo, a man who spent his 70s believing life had already run its course, but it was exactly in this phase that he discovered the true meaning of being alive. And what he found might change the way you see time, loss, and most of all, what's still to come. Stay till the end, because what begins as loneliness ends as rebirth. And maybe this is also your time to be reborn. When everything seemed too late. At 70, Anselmo no longer expected any big surprises from life. He walked slowly, not just because of his tired knees, but because he seemed to carry the weight of decades on his back. 2 grown children, each absorbed in their own routines, calling only on holidays and even then, with little time for conversation. The wife who had been by his side for so many years had left 15 years earlier, without much explanation, just a tired look and a packed suitcase. Retirement, which he once imagined would be a well-deserved rest after so much effort, turned out to be a silent punishment. No more deadlines, no more demands. And with that, no more purpose. He woke up every day before sunrise, not by choice, but because sleep came lightly and left early, as if even rest had lost the will to stay. He made his coffee in silence, sat in the same chair on the porch, and stared at the backyard like someone waiting for something they no longer remembered. He watched the plants grow, the birds pass by, the cars in the distance coming and going, and wondered, is this all there is? Is this how a man's life ends? Time seemed to slip through the cracks of the door. The hours dragged on. Meals, always eaten alone, tasted more like routine than food. At night, the TV was a noisy companion for a silent heart. He knew every show, but none could fill the emptiness in his chest. He no longer made plans. He no longer saw a reason to try anything new. What could possibly come after 70? Who, after all, still cared? And yet, there was something there. Something faint, almost imperceptible, like a gentle breeze on a stifling morning. A restlessness, a question that kept coming back. Is it really over? Or did I just stop trying to see? Because deep in his soul, there was still a flicker, a whisper, something inside him that refused to accept the lukewarm ending of a story that had once been so full of color, noise, and love. It was at that moment, sitting on the porch, with his eyes lost on the horizon, that Anselmo felt for the first time in years that maybe there was still something left to discover. He didn't know what, he didn't know how, but he knew he was still alive. And that, in itself, was a beginning. The doubt that once felt like an end was now a crack. And through that crack, a soft, almost timid light began to seep in. Chance, the possibility that life wasn't just a straight line fading away, but a cycle that could indeed begin again, even when it seemed too late. He didn't get up from the chair right then. It wasn't an epiphany, nor a miracle. But in that everyday silence, in that feeling of being on the edge of the world, a spark emerged, the tiny spark of hope. And every flame, no matter how big, starts like this, with a breath of courage, in a heart that had already given up believing. And that's when, without realizing it, Anselmo took his first step. Not with his feet, but with his heart. The invisible weight of loneliness. Anselmo's loneliness wasn't loud. It was subtle, almost polite. It didn't knock on the door or make a scene. It just was there. It took up space on the living room couch, sat with him at meals, and lay beside him every night. It wasn't a silence that came from outside, it came from within. A heavy, thick silence mingling with memories and creating a void that no music or television could fill. He saw people. He said good morning to the baker, thanked the cashier. At the grocery store, exchanged a few words with the neighbor across the street. But all of it was like rain in the desert. It wet the ground for a moment, then quickly evaporated. There was no depth, no affection. No one who truly wanted to know how he really was. The strangest part? From the outside, Anselmo seemed fine. He dressed carefully, kept his house tidy, paid his bills on time. He was the kind of elderly man no one worried about because he managed on his own. But inside, he carried a weariness that wasn't physical. It was an exhaustion of the soul. The kind of fatigue that comes from pretending for so long that everything is fine, when it really isn't. On the hardest days, he tried to distract himself. He picked up old books, tinkered with tools in the garage, or went downtown just to watch people pass by. But nothing filled the emptiness. Because what he needed wasn't activity, it was connection. Someone to look him in the eye and truly see him. Someone who would say, I care. The problem with loneliness isn't being alone. It's feeling invisible. It's when you start to believe that if you disappeared today, the world would go on just the same. And Anselmo was beginning to believe that his time had passed, that his story no longer mattered, that he was just another face in the crowd. But deep down, something still resisted. Something small but stubborn. A memory of times when life was loud, full of voices, the smell of food in the kitchen, toys scattered on the floor. The memory of a baby's cry, now grown into a man. The sound of his wife's laughter, long gone, and that hurt. It hurt because it reminded him how much he missed it all. But it also hurt because it proved that yes, he still felt. And whoever still feels, still lives. It was during this time that Anselmo began to realize a hard truth. Old age doesn't just hurt the body. It hurts the soul most of all, when you realize the world seems to have moved on without you. The kids are in a hurry. The grandkids have their own lives, old friends have faded away. And then, the mirror doesn't just show gray hair, it reflects. A silent question echoing in your heart. Does anyone even see me anymore? That painful question was also the start of a turning point. Because it made Anselmo look inward with more honesty. He didn't want to pretend anymore. He didn't want to just accept things. He didn't want to be another old man waiting for time to pass. He wanted to find meaning again. He wanted to feel alive. And that desire, however faint, made room for what was coming next. Because, as life itself teaches, when the soul decides it's not done yet, the universe listens. And what Anselmo didn't know was that something was about to happen. Something small, simple, but powerful enough to change everything. An unexpected visit. That morning, the sky was overcast. The kind of day made for curling up on the couch with a blanket and no desire to go out. Anselmo had just put the kettle on when the intercom buzzed. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked slowly to the speaker, pressed the button, and heard a soft voice on the other end. Hi, Grandpa. It's me, Julia. It took him a second to process. Julia, his youngest granddaughter. It had been months since he'd seen her, always. Busy with school, friends, the fast-paced life he no longer understood. And yet, there she was, standing at the gate, backpack on her shoulders and a smile hidden behind her shy surprise. Anselmo rushed down the 3 flights of stairs with an energy he didn't even remember he had. When he opened the gate, he saw the girl who was now almost a woman, her mother's eyes, her father's curiosity. She hugged him without a word. And in that embrace, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Presence. They went upstairs together, drank tea. At first, they talked little him, slightly awkward, not knowing what to say. Her, with the restless energy of a 17-year-old, balancing respect and spontaneity. But soon, the silence was broken by a simple question. Grandpa, can I interview you? He raised an eyebrow. Interview me? It's for a school project, free topic. I chose to write about what it means to live. And no one's better to answer that than you. Anselmo smiled without showing his teeth. It was a surprised smile, almost childlike. No one had asked him a question like that in so long. No one had wanted to know what he thought, what he felt, what he remembered. But there she was, notebook in hand, eyes attentive, waiting for wisdom he didn't even know he still carried. Tell me, Grandpa, what has life taught you? The question hung in the air. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window, as if reliving everything at once: his poor childhood, the hard work, the marriage, the children, the losses, and most of all, the silence of the last few years. Finally he spoke. Life has taught me that we spend too much time chasing what we think is important, and we forget to live what truly matters. Julia wrote it all down, with sparkle in her eyes, with respect, with love. And in that moment, Anselmo felt something ignite inside him. Maybe he still had something to offer. Maybe his story still mattered. Maybe the time that seemed wasted had actually just been waiting for the right moment to bloom. When she left, she placed a note on the table. Thank you, Grandpa. Today I learned more from you than in years of school. He read it over 10 times that day. And each time, he felt a little more alive, a little more needed. And for the first time in a long time, a little happier. Little did he know that simple visit was the start of a quiet revolution. Because when someone cares about your story, you start to care again too. The diary that was never written. That night, after Julia left, Anselmo sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Her note was still there, next to the empty cup, as if it had left an echo in the air. He reread those words like someone rummaging through an old chest and finding a forgotten treasure. Today I learned more from you than in years of school. It kept echoing in his mind. Not out of vanity, he wasn't a man easily flattered, but because of the realization, his life, after all, still had something to teach. Then slowly, he got up, walked to the back of his bedroom closet, and pulled out an old hardcover notebook he bought years ago but never used. He sat in his armchair, picked up a pen, and stared at the blank page. The silence in the house felt less heavy now. The blank page no longer intimidated him. And in an almost instinctive gesture, he began to write. At first, scattered words came out: names, dates, childhood memories. Then came sentences, stories, moments that seemed erased but returned with surprising force. He wrote about being a boy, helping his father in the fields, about the first time he saw the ocean, about the day he met Eliza, his wife, and how she wore a blue dress that never faded from his memory. He wrote about the birth of his children, about pride, mistakes, arguments. And with misty eyes, he wrote about the silence that remained after she was gone. Hours passed, and he only noticed when the sky outside began to lighten. He had filled 3 pages. 3 pages that, to him, felt like entire chapters of a forgotten book. This wasn't an ordinary diary. It was a conversation with the past. A rescue. An attempt to remember who he was before he became invisible. In the days that followed, writing became a habit. Every morning, before coffee, he wrote. And at night, he reread what he had written, like revisiting an old friend. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he just sat in silence, staring at the page as if it were staring back. That diary, which began as an exercise in memory, soon became a bridge. A bridge between the man he had been and the man he could still be. More than just remembering, writing helped him understand. To forgive himself for not being the perfect father. To accept that not everything lost was his fault. And to recognize that, even with the marks of time, he was still whole. Still someone. Julia came back a few times, and he read her passages from what he'd written. She listened intently, asked questions, sometimes cried quietly, and he felt useful. Felt like his words were planting something in her, maybe a new way of seeing the world, maybe a new way of seeing the elderly. Over time the diary grew. It filled one notebook, then another. And he began to wonder, what if this could help others? What if there are more Anselmos out there, waiting for a chance to be heard? That seed was planted there, between lines written with wrinkled hands, and a heart that was finally beginning to open again. Because sometimes all we need is a blank page, and the courage to tell ourselves we're still alive. When teaching is also learning, Julia's visits became more frequent. She came on weekends, sometimes after school during the week, and the two had developed a little ritual. Tea, 2 chairs on the porch, and unhurried conversation. At first she came to hear her grandfather's stories, but over time, Anselmo began listening to hers too. And that's when he realized something unexpected. Even with a 53-year age gap, there was still so much he could learn. Julia spoke about the world in ways he'd never seen. She talked about the challenges of her generation, about anxiety, the rush of social media, the loneliness that exists even among the young. She played him music he'd never heard, showed him funny videos on her phone, and laughed loudly, the way only the young laugh with their whole soul. And Anselmo, little by little, set aside his skepticism and started paying attention. Because beneath the fast-paced language and the digital world he didn't understand, there were emotions, just as human as his own. Similar pains, familiar fears, a longing to be accepted, heard, loved. Julia, on the other hand, listened to Anselmo with admiration. When he told her how his family survived on a minimum wage salary, or explained why he still wore the same watch, his wife's last gift to him, she didn't just listen. She absorbed it, and he could see it in her eyes. What he thought had no value anymore was planting something deep in his granddaughter's heart. One afternoon, she asked him to help her with a school assignment on family values. He said, "You can find that on the internet, kid." She replied, "But I want to hear it from someone who's really lived it." That's when Anselmo understood. He was more than just a retired old man with time to spare. He was an open book, a keeper of stories, a teacher of life. And perhaps most importantly, he was a bridge between the past and the future, between what had been lived and what could still be lived. Their exchange became a kind of balm, he taught. With simple words, with meaningful silences, with glances that said more than any manual ever could. And she taught him with sincere questions, genuine attention, and a tenderness he thought had been lost to time. During one of their talks, she asked, "Grandpa, do you regret anything?" He took his time answering. He looked at the ground, then at the sky. "I regret waiting so long to open my heart, living afraid of seeming weak, thinking that growing old meant stopping living." She took his hand, said nothing, but in that gesture was the answer. It's never too late to begin again. Anselmo learned from his granddaughter that teaching isn't just passing on knowledge, it's making space. It's building bridges. It's letting yourself be seen. And in this new role, he never imagined mentor, guide, present grandfather, he rediscovered not just joy, but purpose. Because when someone listens to you with an open heart, even your scars become wisdom. Invisible Club. It was during one of these conversations with Julia, between sips of tea and memories drifting in like a warm breeze, that an unexpected idea surfaced. She remarked casually, "Grandpa, these stories shouldn't stay just with me." Anselmo smiled, not quite understanding. "What do you mean, kid? There must be so many people your age who feel like you used to, lonely, forgotten. If each of them shared just a little of their life, I think it could change everything." The words echoed in his mind. Change everything? That was too big a thought for a man in his 70s with shaky hands and a long past. But something inside him wouldn't let the idea die. The next week, he mustered his courage and spoke to the building manager. He asked to use the courtyard on Saturday mornings. Just 5 chairs, a table, and an umbrella. He didn't explain much more. The manager, surprised, agreed. And so the following Saturday, Anselmo went there with a handwritten sign, "The Invisible Club, a gathering of living stories." As he taped it to the gate, he wondered who would even come. But they came, first. Just Donna Marlene from the 4th floor, with her cane and her still bright eyes. Then Sue Otacilio, who hadn't left his apartment since his wife passed. And slowly, others began to appear. Each with their own pace, their own pain, their own story. What started with 5 chairs became a circle. What was just a meeting became a ritual. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't a lecture. It was just people listening to each other. There was no rush here. Stories unfolded at the pace of breath. Some spoke about childhoods in the countryside. Others about first loves. Some cried. Some laughed. But everyone listened. And for the first time in a long time, they felt seen. Anselmo became known as the one who took the first step. But he knew the credit belonged to them all. Because this wasn't about being special. It was about breaking the silence. Showing that time doesn't erase anyone's worth. The name Invisible Club seemed ironic. Because in that space, no one was invisible. Every gaze was welcomed. Every voice respected. Every story celebrated. And there, sitting among those the world had forgotten, Anselmo understood something simple yet powerful. Loneliness ages you far more than time ever could. But being heard, that rejuvenates even the weariest soul. He walked home with a warmth in his chest. With brighter eyes, with the certainty that he'd found a new place in the world. Not as a spectator, but as part of it. And the most beautiful part? What began as a small gesture, setting out chairs in a courtyard, was changing lives, including his own. Anselmo never imagined that at 70, he'd find a new purpose. But it was exactly at this point in his life, when he thought everything had already passed, that something new began. And it wasn't a miracle. It wasn't some grand twist of fate. It was a step. A tea shared with his granddaughter, a blank page. A conversation in the courtyard. It was the simple, the human, the present. He discovered that the meaning of life isn't in grand achievements, but in the small moments we choose to live with honesty. In the bonds we build, the stories we tell, and most of all the listening we offer others. Old age isn't the end. It's the highest point on the mountain. Where everything is seen with more clarity, more calm. More compassion. Anselmo still writes in his diary, "The Invisible Club keeps growing, and he never wakes up feeling useless anymore. Now, he wakes with a mission, to show that there's still time. Time to love. To begin again. To make peace with the past and create a present with more meaning." And you? If this story moved you, maybe it's because something inside you is also ready to awaken. Maybe you, too, are sitting on life's porch, waiting for something to change. And the truth is, you don't have to wait. You can start now. You can write your story. You can listen to someone. You can reach out. You can, like Anselmo, discover that the meaning of life isn't in the time that's past, but in what you choose to do with the time you still have. If this spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "There's still time for me." Just as Anselmo was heard, we want to hear you. 2. Subscribe if you believe stories like this can change lives. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Because no one should feel invisible. And here, every story matters. See you in the next video. And remember, as long as there's life, there's meaning.